So welcome everyone. I believe there's going to be more people chiming in, and here we go. Right when I said that. Welcome to the Offsite Construction Series. We're super happy that you're here. The Offsite Construction Series is presented by Modular Sure Site along with some partners. The reason for putting together this series is so that we can continue the conversation about all forms of offsite construction. I think it's really necessary, especially in today's time with COVID and the other things that we are seeing and the change in construction in general. So we're super excited to have all of you here. Our events are always the second Tuesday and the last Tuesday of the month. They're always at 4 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. So I know for Anastasia, our guest, it's 5 o'clock there, right, Anastasia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what happens. So we're going to start off with our partners. And our first partner is Mountain View Window and Door, of which Matt McMullen is here. So Matt, take it away.
Yeah, hey, thanks everybody for joining us. I'm a general manager at Mountain View Window and Door. We provide windows and doors. We lead with the Anderson brand. We actually, Scotty and I were just at a modular factory Wednesday and Thursday in beautiful Nebraska, dropping off a shipment of windows for a couple projects that we're designing, some high-end custom single-family homes. So thank you for joining us. If there's any way and you're in town and we can help you with windows, doors, large doors, sliding doors, please give us a call.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. Greg KROM is with 303 Development. I know he's going to be joining us. At least he said so. Last time I talked to him.
I was excited to finally see him.
I know, I would love to, right? He's with 303 Development. Greg is actually a traditional home builder who also does commercial projects, and over the last 3 years has partnered with Modular Sure Site doing modular projects. So all of the friends out there that are doing traditional, here's another one of your friends that has done the same and is now walking into the modular arena, which is super exciting. The art of construction, I'm going to let Scott speak about that, which is, again, a great partner and valued partner with us.
Thanks, Andre. So, hello, all of you. Thank you for joining us today. Art of Construction is a podcast and media platform about the world of construction. We have a whole series we did with Audrey about modular called Systems Built Lifestyle. And coming up, we're about to have a bunch of new episodes, one of which next week actually is including a member of a venture capital fund that actually has invested in Manufactin, which was Jason Barber had a great presentation from him last time. But it's a really cool world of forward-thinking AEC professionals that we're involved in, and we encourage you to check out our website and listen to our episodes.
Thank you. So here is our fabulous Anastacia with ResElevate. The interesting thing about Anastacia is she's from my hometown, Chicago. I met her a little over a year, maybe almost 2 years ago, and she is like my greatest resource for land development and understanding it and planning communities. That's really her background. It's been really interesting because she and I have talked so many times about modular, and now she's effectively bringing that into communities. So Anastacia, thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. Audrey, thank you. And it's been, it's great to have this platform that you and your partners have established here and really shine light on all the cool things that are happening in this space. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so Audrey and I were talking, and she'd asked me to sort of present and be able to talk about the developments that we're doing, and particularly why offsite construction, why modular, and I'm going to spend a good chunk of my presentation talking about why now. And so really these are sort of the 5 buckets for the next hour, and I'm happy to sort of open it up to anybody who has thoughts or questions as I'm rolling along. Feel free to just shout out, and happy to have a conversation. But so I'm going to give some brief background about me and sort of my experience in construction and development. I've been doing it my entire career. And I think it's important to just sort of kind of give a basis of why and how ResElevate came about and why we're focusing on modular. And then I am going to talk a good chunk about the market, very high level things that have happened since the last recession, and particularly why all of that's favorable for modular construction. I'm going to briefly go through the benefits of modular and prefab. And I know somebody earlier mentioned that they're interested in learning about modular. So I will touch about the benefits the way that we see them. But it's more related to our developments than it is on the factory, sort of behind the scenes of the modular. And then I'm going to give a couple examples of some master plan communities, one of which that we're getting here ready to launch in the next month. And that's more resort driven. And then one that we're working on that's more affordable housing driven, and how we're both from a land planning standpoint to architecture and all of that. So you'll be able to see some examples. And then I'm going to sort of close it and talk a little bit about the challenge, some of the challenges as we face as developers, and then also and some of the opportunities that we see that we're excited about. So that's kind of going to be the presentation today. So let's see if this works. Here we go. So some background on me. So for about 10 years, I worked for a real estate developer here in Chicago. We focus primarily on master plan community development. So one of my first projects with this group was, there are about 25 markets. They were getting a lot of deal flow, frankly, and there were about 25 markets that they were looking at investing in and growing. And we had been in Chicago suburbs for a long time, and we had been in Florida, and we had just started looking in the Arizona Scottsdale market. And so one of the first things we did was we looked at 25 markets. We hired Hanley Wood and Associates and looked at 25 markets across the United States and came up with our own internal analysis factors about which markets we wanted to invest in. And then we spent the next 6 months kind of fine tuning that to our top 5. And so then from 2006 to 2012, we were actively pursuing, acquisitions of master plan communities in those markets. And I share that because, I was very blessed, frankly, to be working for a great family that can keep me busy in the downturn. I mean, there weren't a lot of people with an acquisitions title when I was working in that arena. And so we were, repositioning some of our assets. We were looking at buying builders. We were looking at, product diversification to achieve different price points. And so a lot of that is important to kind of what we're working on now, because that was based on larger communities. So, we weren't looking at anything less than, frankly, 300 acres of land. And we were looking at primarily second move up home buyer situations. So it was very targeted, very niche of what we did. And we did a great job doing it. And so I left the development side and I went complete extreme opposite. So I worked for a small private family with 13 people. And, we managed thousands of units across the country. And then I worked for a corporate publicly traded home builder, D.R. Horton Homes, largest publicly traded home builder in Chicago. So it's a very different environment completely. It was great, but I really wanted to learn the vertical side. And one of the things that I loved about Horton was sort of this production orientation, in the sense that in a lot of ways, production builders act like manufacturers, right? It's very there's an efficient process. They have product control. They're not that they don't change the product. They do change the product, but repetition is key. How many times over can we do this again? And then also just from a benchmark, they really don't want to focus anything. They want high volume, minimum number of units per project. So what was happening, particularly in Chicago, which is where I'm from and focus a lot of my energy in the Northwest Indiana and the Chicago MSA, is that a lot of the large builders who were able to achieve lower costs were focused on big projects. And so a lot of little projects were getting kind of overlooked because at that point, this is in 2015, privates were starting to get back into the market. They were starting to get capital again. And so we saw a real opportunity to take sort of our institutional way of doing things, but doing it on a much smaller scale and an infill scale. And so we started ResElevate and primarily started consulting for probably a handful of developers around the area. And at that time, that's when, this is about 4 years ago, we started getting involved in trying to understand modular construction. And it was important because, costs were already starting to come up a little bit, and it was difficult to start to produce housing at what we call affordable prices, or workforce housing, or attainable housing, or whatever word that you use to describe that. And so now, we're developing our own projects. We're also consulting for large land developers who have existing assets and are helping them reposition them, and thinking about whether it's just bringing modular product to their communities, or also whether or not they want to consider starting a manufacturing plant to help build and produce modular housing for their inventory. So I'm going to keep going here. That's just a little bit of background of sort of how this has evolved. So the next couple slides are very high level. This is sort of kind of mimics my career path a little bit, but it's very, I kind of broke this up to different phases of things that have happened since the recession and kind of where we are today. So post-recession, new housing, these are the new housing supply prices based from what? So at that time, right, development was trading under replacement cost. You could buy vacant developed lot inventory for pennies on the dollars. You could also buy existing housing stock under replacement cost, and that was something for us, and a challenge, or something that we needed to always think about, was how do we compete with what's existing that probably is about the same square footage and same price than what we were building at the time. And then you had a tremendous amount of distressed land, right? Bank REOs, your labor costs were low, your material costs had been down or stagnant. And so this was a really favorable time that once demand for housing started to increase, that builders can now offer what I call affordable workforce attainable housing, right? It's sort of, housing that would be priced for a good portion of the country. And that was all, that's all coming out of the recession, where your basis for your land and your developed land is very low. So we continue to progress after a recession, right? And things continue to move. We start to see urban infill markets. We start to see high demand in those markets. We start to see new land being developed, so folks like D.R. Horton or other production builders or other regional strong builders are starting to think about developing land, right, in A to C locations for new housing. We're starting to see housing prices that they need to increase from where they were to be financially feasible. So we're pushing pricing in this phase. And then we see pent-up demand supplied. And so this is where, a lot of buyers, entry-level buyers, first-time home buyers who were thinking about buying but didn't, started to enter the marketplace, and we're starting to supply all of the pent-up demand that was pretty much lost in a 10-year recession. We're seeing job growth recovery. We're seeing multifamily starts are high. There's this sort of single-family rental communities that's involved, and capital is being raised from Wall Street to be able to invest in these types of assets. Scattered single-family rentals, right? These are all business models that probably were always there, but really started to come out of this last recession. And all of this kind of goes to the price and investment pressures are starting to really be felt in kind of this new supply of development. So this is sort of what I would say would be phase 3, which is, multifamily domination, right? And so when you think about the entry-level home buyer, or you think about the millennial, or you think about the different demographics of people who are needing housing, a lot of that supply has been from the multifamily market, and for a number of reasons. And you can get in at a certain, we always talk in a home builder, we always talk about payments. Everything was related to payments. What's the payment? And can the market support the payment? And so when you think about it from a payment standpoint, multifamily is very favorable for people because it's all in, right? So and a lot of times you can get the density in urban places. So now you're living in a really great place and having a great experience and not owning a home. So multifamily has definitely been an asset class that's gotten a lot of attention. And then you see these build to rent communities, right? A lot of capital poured in there. And, in the last 5 years, there's been billions of capital that have been raised for construction tech and thinking about how to lower our costs and overall, bringing product to market. And then you also see groups that are non-construction groups that are more tech groups, right? Like Blockwell or other influencers entering this modular offsite construction. And then you have global companies that are sort of leaders globally in modular that now have a presence in the US. And then end users, even when I started, Audrey, 4 years ago in modular and attending all these conferences and everything, when I would come back to Chicago and talk to people, it was still like a little bit like, unfamiliar territory, where I just feel like just in the last 4 years talking to people, people are listening, they want to understand, they want to learn. And I think that that's going to continue to evolve. And so manufactured housing, modular housing has always had just a small portion of the overall market share for new housing development. And I think that's going to continue to increase. I mean, I personally feel it's increased a lot over just the last 4 years. And then, so I also added in here the opportunity zones created by the Tax Cut Jobs Act of 2017. So phase 3 is before 2017, but the reason I add that there is sort of, there's this federal attention in being able to incentivize people for investment in some of these smaller markets, right? And so there's pricing pressures in our big metro areas. So I think that is very much goes hand in hand with sort of what was happening in this area.
Well, I know, and just keep that up for 1 second, Anastacia, because I think you're bringing up a really good point. And, I've only been in modular for 3 years, and from the time I started to where it's at now is a completely different conversation. And I think the thing that also is very interesting, and we even have a couple of people on here that are actually from modular factories, and maybe Chris could speak to this. Indie Dwell is in Pueblo, and they are opening their plant, I think actually this month, which is super exciting. So Chris, where have you seen this discussion go, and why having your plant open now? What are you seeing in the market?
Oh boy, yeah, well, I will give you an update on Pueblo. So our company started, we produced our first prototype in 2017, and we opened our first factory in Caldwell, Idaho, in 2018. So then just this Monday, actually, what day is today? No, last Monday, we opened our Pueblo factory.
Wow.
So that one is 100,000 square feet. We can put out, I think, 320,000 square feet of homes out of that factory there. The Caldwell space is turning into our R&D space, actually. So we're prototyping some new things out of there. So yeah, I mean, we are busier than we could possibly handle. When I came in October of last year, it was just the co-founder and co-chairman who was handling all sales, marketing, and communication. And it's still now just me, and then we have my colleague Brad in Colorado, and we have an overwhelming pipeline for 2 people to handle.
That's great.
So,
It's a good problem to have. But yeah, just like Anastacia and I were talking, it's interesting because even in the land development option, I mean, that these developers are looking at even opening their own factory, which I think is so fascinating. Like, you would think that there would be a hesitation, and people are like, I'm all in. It's amazing.
Yeah, we've seen that too, where we talked to a very large landowner in Colorado, east of Colorado Springs, and that was their initial idea was, well, we'll just put our own modular factory out there and do it ourselves. And I think that that could be a business model that emerges. Our pitch, of course, is why invest the capital when we're, 2 hours south and we already have a proven product out in the market. We can,
Right.
do it for you, because it could be difficult for just a traditional home builder to make that shift from construction mode to manufacturing mode, do very different business models, obviously. So we definitely think there's a lot of value add in what we do.
Thanks for adding that. Go ahead, Anastasia. I just felt like it was important.
thank
to
you.
kind of
Thank you.
No, that's great. That's great. So I think there's sort of this echo of just sort of the momentum that's happened, just even as Chris mentioned, just in the last few years. So again, these are not like scientifically categorized, but this is just sort of the trends and kind of will come into where we are right now is, there's always been affordable housing national attention. That's, we need to produce affordable housing, but there's definitely been a lot more of it in the last 12 months. And even the last 18 months, and attention, I mean, so much so that, California and Seattle and Chicago and these large markets are thinking about accessory dwelling units and how do we produce, more affordable housing options. And, and there's certainly this feel of this missing middle, which I'm going to show a slide to kind of show what that really looks like, of what middle housing classification could afford from a payment standpoint. And then, so the other thing we've seen is that because pricing has come up so much, a lot of homeowners are stuck in the sense that they're not going to move because they're not going to be able to buy anything that they're better off in. So we're seeing a lot of people that are reinvesting in their existing homes, and thinking about maybe buying a second home or a second vacation home, and that they can maybe rent out and Airbnb and then have a different kind of income stream. So there's sort of this, I feel like, shift in kind of what people want. So here's kind of, this is where we are, I would say now. So I'm going to move this over so I can actually do this. Okay. Income constraints. So most metro areas have seen housing cost to income ratios increase to the same peak levels since the mid 2000s. So one of the things that we just don't see is how much income has actually grown. And so I know the Harvard business, the joint study for housing from Harvard, they study this, and they've said that the income has not appreciated high enough for the pricing. And so, at that point you say, okay, well, what is the pricing that most people can afford, right? And then clearly there's a labor shortage, this is one of those things that's, I think, is going to continue to be favorable for modular, is there's a tremendous labor shortage that, according to the Bureau of Labor, the U.S. lost 600,000 construction jobs that never returned in 2008 in the housing recession. And so when you think about that, just from the perspective of, okay, well, if we have housing supply issues, housing shortage of issues in supply, how do we meet those needs? We'd like to think that you can increase labor significantly. I mean, then you have to weigh it, whether or not that's very likely. And I don't think anybody thinks that it is. And I think that we've seen time and time again, it's very difficult to get those folks that left back engaged in this space. And so modular certainly, it creates this opportunity to, not only from the standpoint of just a controlled environment in a factory, but also workforce training. And then also from a technological standpoint. I mean, we've grown so much technologically in this space, just from a manufacturing standpoint, what we're able to do with software and to be very exact in building these units. And so, I think this labor shortage is favorable for modular. There's obviously a tremendous amount of capital out there. I think people are excited and interested in wanting to see, okay, can we disrupt this somehow? We know housing's a real need. We need housing for shelter, for safety. How can we address this? And can we be on the forefront of this change? And then I already talked about the housing shortage. So if you just look here at this graph, you'll see that 73%, now this is, for Chicago MSA. I'm sorry, it doesn't say that on here, but this is also pre-COVID, okay? So this is December of last year, but 73% of folks in the Chicago MSA make less than $99,000. And so what does that mean? okay? So here's what that means. So the average median income, which is also known as AMI in the affordable housing world, if the average median income for the household is $56,000, then basically that person could afford something around $1,600 a month, all in for house, taxes, insurance. That's kind of the affordability metrics of lending institutions and what they could afford. So how does that translate to home value? So that translates to home value of, let's say, $190,000 to $230,000. And if you were to look here and you would go to the next one, which is lower bound, which is 66% of AMI, that's $37,000. And then the upper bound, which is 2 times AMI, is $3,200, which is about $392,000 to $463,000. And then 120% AMI. And I use the 120s because sometimes that's a benchmark. So most of your affordable housing dollars will be geared for anything under 60% AMI. Some of them, some of the programs out there allow you to go to 90%, and some of them will actually go to 120. But most subsidy available for housing is for the lower bound. And so if you were to look at this and you say, okay, so for whatever reason, Chris, if you and I come up with a way to build housing I want to address the $56,000 income person, that means that housing needs to be all in at the end of the day to them at $190,000 to $230,000. And so I don't know anything about your company, which I'd like to learn, but for a traditional home building, that's almost impossible now because you have to develop the land, you have to build the infrastructure. And so it's really difficult to, historically, even in Chicago, we'd have production builders building entry-level housing and develop land and pay their taxes or proffers or whatever you call them and be profitable. And that's just really that's really, really difficult to do today. So I wanted to just show this as sort of a benchmark when we're talking about affordable housing and what people can afford. So then I'm kind of jumping into the benefits of modular here. So these would be the sort of 4 buckets that we look at as a developer of why we would consider modular. And just as a side note, so every development we're doing right now, anything we're building, we're doing cost benefit analysis for on-site versus modular. So we're now, so whether we're going to be building a hotel or whether we're building townhomes or whether we're building a resort community, we're going to look at both modular and on-site. And we've been doing that over the last, almost 2 years now. And I'm happy to share what the experience has been on cost side for both of those. And because sometimes it's actually been more costly for us to go modular than on-site. So here are the sort of 4 buckets. So obviously there's quality and speed. And so I tell people that modular units have to go through the worst earthquake of their life to get to their home, and they have to be built very well. And frankly, oftentimes just from the efficiency standpoint with the installation and going down the line and having the same people do the same thing, it becomes a very effective process for home building. And then the other thing that I think is a huge benefit for us for today is technology. And I mentioned that earlier, is just where we are in the world today and being able to utilize what we know in technology and innovation to really make the home building process something different than it really hasn't been before. I mean, manufactured housing, modular housing, it's been around for a long time. And what's different today, I think, is just this, not only this technology factor, but then these cost issues and labor shortage that we have. We also have, obviously, it's lower impact and less waste, which is really tremendous, the amount of waste that you save building in a factory versus on site. And so some people even say it's more sustainable, it's more green. But then even from a cost side standpoint, if you're able to measure the materials that you actually need for the homes you're actually going to produce out of that plant, that becomes very effective. And so cost savings and shorter build times, a rise in profit. So we see this to be true mostly on like multifamily and commercial projects. On the single family side, It certainly could be true. Like right now, we're working with a builder at Elkhart who's quoted us just last week that the unit would be done at the end of August. So that's really great, but the unit still needs to be transported and then finished. So at that point, it really becomes how quickly can you, developer, and your partners, unless it's a turnkey operation from the manufacturer, get the product to the market. So, you know, certainly for multifamily and commercial, there's, you know, there's a lot of value there, you know, particularly when you're talking about being, you know, with those developments, you have a lot of upfront capital that needs to be out before you get any revenue. And so if you can cut down the time where you're, where, you know, you have the units to a point at least where you could start turning and get people in there, that helps a lot. Okay. So this is kind of just the way, this is sort of just our simple way of looking at sort of this cost benefit from the developer standpoint. And so, you know, side by side, on the left column, you have your on-site construction. On your right column, you have your off-site modular. We also like to use the word precision built a lot. And I can talk a little bit more about that and why that word later. But so you have your land costs, you have your soft costs, you have your site development costs. On the modular side, you have your pre-site development costs. So this is where any grading, this is your foundation poured, this is anything that's preparing for the house to come. On the left side, you have your on-site vertical construction costs. And on the right side, you have your off-site manufacturer costs, which include transportation. So the good thing about this is that on the modular side, I could be working on my pre-site development costs at the same time that my unit's being built, which is really great. And so we can be working in tandem together to have this unit delivered effectively in a shorter period of time than if I were to have trades on site building the unit. Now, the reality is once the unit comes, I need to have it set, and there are finishing costs, particularly if there's landscape or if there's additional things that the manufacturer won't do that I need to do on site, build a garage. So there is some of that, you know, there is some of that, I don't want to call it additional time, it's just costs that you need to be aware of. And so really at the end of the day, what we're telling people is that if you can get me to par, then we'll go modular. Meaning if, you know, if my on-site development is going to, if I could be at the end price the same as my off-site, then we'll go modular. And the truth is that there have been plenty of times where my off-site has actually been more. And I'm not saying that that's always the case, but in these specific cases, so what are those cases? So, you know, if you're dealing with an existing community with very strict architectural guidelines, so we had a community that we were looking at taking some cottage lots and transitioning to modular. And we also had a crane set company come and look at the site and give us, you know, a green light if they could do it. And it was going to be much more costly for us because that particular manufacturer, you know, would not, you know, build those roof pitches, and we use that material. So part of it, from my standpoint, you know, one of the things that I think is something that as developers, we just need to understand more, okay, well, what is your product exactly? And how, is there any flexibility in it? And so, you know, we hail from, you know, 2 hours from Elkhart, Indiana, which is sort of the hub for a lot of what was manufactured housing. And a lot of those builders, probably all of them, are in modular. But frankly, a lot of them have very specific specifications of what they will and won't do. And so for us, it's sort of like, okay, I think, Chris, to your point, you said that developer was looking at something and you're only 2 hours away. Well, if I could save my transport cost working with somebody out of Indiana and they can modify their product, it's going to be much more cost effective for me than going to Wyoming and getting something similar. And so,
can I ask you a question on this formula that you guys have put together? Just curious. So just from my own experience and the things that I have done on my own projects, you know, one of the biggest things that I don't see on here is the savings in time to completion. So a lot of the times these projects that you're doing on site, let's say they take 12 months, but if you're doing offsite, you're finishing them in 9 months. Is there a cost value for that time savings because you're not paying interest, right, for 3 months and you're having the project done quicker? Have you guys talked about that, or is that something that you're even considering in this model?
It's definitely something we consider. It's not on this one, but it's definitely something we consider, absolutely. If we can achieve the revenue 3 months earlier, and especially when we're so seasonal driven here in the fact of when you want to build, when you don't want to build, not that you can't build in the winter, but it's much more costly to do it. So yeah, it's a great point, Audrey. That's certainly part of the conversation and the analysis. And the other thing, so this is kind of where this last point on this slide is where we're spending some of our time right now in helping land developers decide whether or not they want to be the manufacturer. And so, before I do that, hold on one second. I can go back here. Maybe it's here. So obviously, if you look on the right side of the offsite modular precision built column, the offsite manufacturer cost. So in that cost to me is profit, right? And obviously that comes with added risk and a whole business model and a lot of capital. So one of the things that we're saying is that if you are trying to achieve certain pricing diversification in your communities that you can't otherwise achieve right now, that modular might be a really great opportunity for you because there's added profit from the manufacturing side. Meaning if you're a turnkey manufacturer developer, then you can build your own product in your own communities and produce a turnkey operation. Now, I don't recommend, manufacturers getting into land development. I think it's the reverse. I think it's those that have large land assets that need to recapitalize their investments. And, in order to do that, you need to have product diversification on some of these large land deals. Then that could be a good way to do it. So that we're on the consulting side, we're focused on helping some groups with a national presence consider that. So I'm going to keep going. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, bring it on. Did anybody else have any other questions or anything that they'd like to interject? Please feel free.
Okay. So I put two examples together for us today. This first one is a resort community. So Rob, my partner, is also on the line too, so he could be available if we have any other questions or thoughts. So this is a property, and I'm going to kind of give you sort of the history and kind of where we went and where we're going now with it. But this is a property in Northwest Indiana. It's about 100 acres of land that we purchased, and it has about $2 million of infrastructure in the ground. So that spine road is in, all the dry utilities in. You can't probably see it on the presentation, but lot 4 is a single family home that's on an existing. So when we purchased this property, we really thought about, okay, how can we take this 100 acres and 40 of which is developable? So all of these platted lots, if you were to add them all up, is about 40 acres. And convert this community, which was designed to be, if you look at the original plat in 2008, this was sort of, and then the second plat in 2010, this was designed to be like the McMansion sort of 2-acre lot development. But how can we take that and transition it to something that is still, preserves and honors sort of the natural beauty, the rolling terrain of the site, but has smaller homes. So instead of one, 5,000 square foot home or one 4,000 square foot home, you would have 5 or 6 small units on these lots. And this was geared again for a more resort second home. This market generally is a strong resort second home. It's close to the beach. It's close to some other great cities. And so that was sort of the plan. So we started going down the road with the county and all the powers to be to start thinking about rezoning. Again, these are platted, permit ready to go lots. So technically we could just build, pull a permit and start building on it. But we wanted to do something cool. So this is what we wanted to do. So I don't know if you can see this. We're going to take each one of these lots. So the orange overlay shows you each lot. And then if you were to look very closely, you would see these small little boxes. And those are homes. So for example, if you were to take one of the, and I have a close-up. Yeah, this is a close-up. If I were to take lot 17, for example, you can see small collector or small road, and then you can see 7 homes on that road. So that was our vision here, is to take something and do something like this. And so we're these really great we'll call them one box, okay, in modular term, but these really great cottages, high-end, very, architecturally feels really good within sort of, still honoring the natural preserve. And there was a lot of attention in this property paid to, even the road location of where it is. And so, we hired Tesca, who's been my planner for 10 years plus out of Illinois, to come up with this great visioning. And so we'd have, different community areas. It's what's not on here was, cool zip lining or mountain biking. There's some really great paths and ravines. And so we started, and I share all this to kind of just give you some backdrop of how this has evolved. So we started down this road to rezone it. So one of the things that came up was, okay, well, we love this idea, but you need to build a sanitary treatment plant. And so we spent a few months looking at different facilities, very cool systems, sustainable things that are more affordable. And then at the end of the day, I think the counties decided that they don't want the density. And so, and I share this because I think one of the things is for all of us on the call or anybody who's in this space and thinking about where we're going in this industry as it relates to housing and even vacation homes, having these smaller homes is something that we've seen that people really want. And so, but to do that, you really need to have the density to support it. So I think, one of the things that we're spending a lot of our time on is just educating municipalities and counties about the benefits of not only modular housing. I mean, sometimes they don't really know the difference between modular and manufactured housing. What's the difference between modular and manufactured housing? Well, modular is built to your code, manufactured is built to HUD code. There's different financing, So it's been part of a lot of what we're doing in this space is just being able to educate the local leadership of these cities and these counties about the product looks great. It feels great. It can look just as nice or better than an on-site constructed home. And then also not to be scared about the density, because people really want they want to feel, at least this is what we're finding in the areas that we're developing, is that they want to feel like they're part of a larger community, but they still want to have space. They still want to have their own, their own opportunity to enjoy the outdoors. So this was an example of us taking one of the lots and transitioning them to a few different modules. So I think the good news is we're not doing we own the land, so we're do something just as cool. It's just not going to be as dense. So what we're doing is we're going to have one home, and then we're going to have an accessory dwelling unit or some other. And that home could be several modules together and connected. And then, and I think that the whole goal here is to give people flexibility to have, if they wanted to, rent out the house for Airbnb, that you can have one family stay in one portion of the home and you can have another family stay in another portion of the home, and then they lock off. And then, so it could be connected, the modules could be connected, or we can also do an accessory dwelling unit. So in our code, we can do one accessory dwelling unit. And then I don't know if anybody here has ever stayed in it. If you've stayed in it, I'd love to hear about your experience, or heard of under canvas. So, you know, this is an opportunity that we'd love to provide here in this community where you can rent a tent and have sort of this glamping experience here, and that we could park it on your lot, we could park it in the common area in the community. So this is one where we're looking, and we've hired Studio One architects out of Illinois to help us design our product. And so this is one, Audrey, that we're looking at.
It looks fun.
What?
It looks fun.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to keep going. So this one is, this is an example of an affordable housing modular community. So this is, you know, less than a half-acre lot in the suburbs of Chicago. And again, Pesca's our planner here. And this, what I'm showing you is some sensitivity of how to play with density on small one-box modules. So this is, you can see the plan on the left is 7 units. There's a garage, and then you have some open space. And so, and that back area is an alley. So that kind of, and the front area is a road. So we're kind of, you know, constrained a little bit with, from a planning perspective, what we do. But I was really impressed with their ability to get some nice density and still have something that feels good here. And then the middle one, you can see we don't have any garage, we just have some parking spaces, but we're getting about 10 units here. And the one on the right, you do have a garage, you have some open space in the area, and you're a little bit less on the density side. So the other thing that I would say, you know, is I have an audience to toot my horn a little bit on, you know, the sort of zoning and municipal constraints as it relates to this kind of product, is that a lot of these small urban infill sites are zoned like commercial or really high density. And so, you know, one of our challenges has been to like down zone some of this stuff, in the sense that, you know, well, maybe you were planning 30 multifamily units here, but we want to build 10 small homes. And then also getting them over the hump of what a one box module looks like, because a lot of people think of a one box module as a mobile home park. And so it's, you know, it's finding, you know, the right product. It's, you know, showing visually what could actually happen. And then also showing the benefits of having this product, and also, you know, meeting these price points in their community. So these are sort of Anastacia things that need to happen in order to really, I think, get us over the hump. And so it's just, you know, educating, I'm going to go back to this, educating municipalities and governing bodies about modular, how it's built, the quality, and what it can do for their community. It's also, you know, as a collective, the more examples we can show of good high density projects, the better off we are, because you really need the density to make some of this stuff work. And, you know, I tell people all the time, because it's a one box module, you know, it could be anywhere from, let's just say 550 feet. And we're looking at some of them as large as 880 feet. But when you think about a multifamily apartment building, and you think about families raising kids in apartment buildings, this is no different than that. This could be bigger. And then you also have some green space, and you also have some opportunity, you know, you feel like you're in a single family home. And so just from a product standpoint, it's not very different than what's in most American cities. And then obviously, you know, one of the things for us has been, as a developer who's kind of wanting to put modular in our communities, is just having the right general contractor and set crews that are familiar with the product. And so we're a dealer for a lot of the builders in Elkhart. So we can buy directly from the manufacturers. And so those that are really experienced in this area with modular set and all of that, they're their own dealer per se. And so they're not really interested in just GCing the set and the crane, because their whole bread and butter business, right, is to be the dealer, sell the product. And so one of the things I think there's an opportunity for is just having more general contractors more familiar, and having opportunities for folks to learn. And Audrey, you've been great. You've been wonderful and just a great resource for us in helping us understand, you know, even though we've been in development a long time, what are these nuances that you just can't fail? You know, you just have to do right. So certainly, you know, appreciate your voice and your experience in that. But locally, that's definitely something that we see opportunity for. And then, you know, the sooner we can understand what manufacturers are, you know, and every manufacturer has, you know, their geographic boundaries on their website, and they're very forthcoming about where they can ship and what they can do. And so, but as soon as we understand what brings you to the custom side of your product, you know, where are your yes, I can, no, I can't, then I think we can more easily find the right building partner. And then I think the last opportunity just in this space, I think that there's part of the capital stack that could you know, can get high volume, but maybe a lower yield, because a lot of this, I mean, a one box module, unless you're in, you know, a really high end market, it's going to cap itself out at some point, right? And so, I'm not saying there can't be $1 million one boxes, but where are they located, right? And so, at some point, you know, if this is really going to serve affordable housing segment, it needs to be financeable, and it needs to be there needs to be capital that's interested in a higher volume, lower yield kind of platform. So, and then my last thing that I will leave you with, that is a quote that says, "Whatever good things we build end up building us." And I love that, because I think about, just as we started this conversation about the last 4 years and all of the great things, and Chris, in your company, and all of these things that have happened in our market, and it's just going to get better, and we're just going to be better at doing it, and we're going to have more options, and so that's it with 4 minutes left.
Nice job. Let's see, please open up your mic and ask away. Get your questions out. So we have some traditional builders on this call. What are you guys feeling about this? Where are you at in your company, like Red Tea? Where are you guys at in your discussions? Either Hannah or I believe there was it Evan? How are you guys in this discussion? What's going on with your team? And Anastacia, can you stop sharing, please?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is Hannah with Red Tea Homes. So we traditionally have been doing multifamily developments, the townhomes, condos, that sort of thing. And we see a need for, as everywhere, but here in Denver, for the more affordable. So we're looking more into smaller single family homes, detached, that sort of thing. And we would all love to do modular. We haven't done any yet, but we're just starting the conversation, just starting to look into it to see if that's something that's feasible for us.
That's exciting. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Anyone else have anything that they'd like to add? Well, then we will thank you, Anastacia. I think that this is a great insight, and I think you've hit on so many great points. And obviously, I love what you and Rob are doing, and we're in full support. I think it is certainly valuable to, connect with Anastacia if you're doing any type of development, because she really is, like I said, she's like the guru. So it's really great to get her perspective and to see how they're growing. And it's a process, right, Anastacia?
It is. Yeah, certainly it's a process. No, this is great. And I've really enjoyed this, and I'd love to connect with anybody that's part of this group. Thank you, Audrey, for putting this together.
Yeah, for sure. And if you want in the chat box, if you can just put your email address and your contact information, because I didn't do that. I can also add it onto the email. We will have this link on Modular Sure Site, so it will be available there, just so everybody kind of knows where to connect with us and find our information. We do have our speaker actually. Is Tim still here? He is. Hi, Tim.
Hey, it's good to see you. Really enjoyed that too, Anastacia. Thank you for that. It's brilliant, brilliant presentation.
And it's going to be cool because you're going to be speaking at the end of the month.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'll be live in the treehouse here.
I know, I was going to ask you about that. Do you have some cool exterior cladding on that?
No, this is just old 1x6 pine, but yeah, that would be a good idea, right? That'd be a good representation. Maybe I should put up some panels just for the podcast or just for the webinar.
That'd be awesome. So I'm just going to put up our next slide so that you guys can kind of figure out what we've got going on at the end of this month. So you guys got to actually meet him live already, which is super awesome. Tim is with Nishiha. Is that how you pronounce it, Tim? Am I pronouncing that correct? Because you know.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Oh, good. That's such good information. Yay. So let me just share this really quickly if I can. Hello.
I think you were already sharing.
Was I? Okay, here we go. All right, so here is our next event. Please feel free to share and connect with us. The link will be available on LinkedIn. That's kind of where a lot of my stuff resides. But he'll be talking about exterior cladding, and it's kind of cool because we met at the International Builder Show, and I've got to see some of his products. So if you are in traditional or modular or any type of offsite construction, he's got great solutions for your exterior, right? Right, Tim?
Yeah, we'll go over, I have some case studies and some cool things to show with folks of the kind of some hybrid and modular approaches. Cladding is kind of a bugaboo for a lot of folks design-wise, the building envelope is, so looking forward to sharing some of the things we've been working on.
I'm excited about that. I think it will be great. So make sure to join us. Again, Anastacia, brilliant as always. You know, my heart goes out to you. I'm excited that you are trying to come up with solutions and you are educating municipalities, because that seems to be our really big next step. I also love the idea of smaller living. We are actually going to have a new partner with us next, our next show, which will be Urban Air Living, which we're excited about that. So that will be something brand new that will be coming in. Bruce Thompson actually spoke a couple of weeks ago about his product and how he's changing the ADU, or the granny flat accessory dwelling unit, as new opportunities to create increased density. So thank you, everyone. Please feel free to connect with Anastacia. Thank you for being here. We certainly value and love all of you, and we love extending this conversation. So let's keep it going. Have an awesome day.
All right. Thank you, Audrey. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.